So one of the most difficult things that I encounter is when people ask me tough questions. How do you think we as Christians can handle those tough questions?
I think one of the most helpful things about tough questions is to realize that tough questions are often trust questions. The issue for people is not the logical answer that they're longing for. For some it may be, but for a lot of people it's an issue of broken trust that they're raising. They may have a breach of trust with the church, thinking that they saw a lot of hypocrites. They may have broken trust with a Christian who hurt them or judged them or alienated them. They may have a trust issue with God when they felt like God wasn't there at a certain point in their lives. So they have this trust issue, and it comes out as a tough question. And our first step is to find out why they're asking the question and to explore whether there might be a trust issue behind the question that we need to address first. If we haven't addressed the trust issue they have, they're not going to hear anything else that we say.
That's totally understandable. So can you give us some examples of where those trust issues are kind of underlying?
Yeah, I was walking through the Einstein Bagels line recently, and I have a friend there named Sam. Sam comes up behind me and he says, oh, by the way, Rick, you're not one of those guys who believes that you're right and everybody else is wrong, are you? You don't think there's only one way to God, do you? And when he asked that, I felt like he might as well have been asking me, you're not one of those axe murderers, are you? Like, he had a huge trust issue. And so the first step in responding to his issue was not to power up with logic about the uniqueness of Christian faith and just to say, oh, absolutely, because he has a certain stereotype, a certain set of pictures about what people are like. And so the first thing I did was ask him, why do you ask? And why do you ask with so much energy? And it was very interesting what he said. He said he had a cousin who sort of beat him over the head with a Bible and judged him for his opinions, and he'd been hurt and turned off ever since and steered clear of those kind of people. And if I'd tried to answer without understanding that he had a huge trust issue, that would have been the end of the conversation and maybe the end of the friendship.
You know, Rick, I think it's a great thing to always preserve the friendship aspect. But, are we then taking the, fine line of moving away from the initial question?
That's a great question. And for me, after I rebuild trust so that I long for God to speak truth to them and for them to take the next step toward God. So for me, trust and truth are companions all the way. So what I said next to Sam, I said after I found out about his cousin and apologized, I said, Sam, I'm not one of those people who think I'm right and everybody else is wrong. I hate that. I don't think any of us has the corner on truth. And I'm sorry that some people communicated that to you. I don't think that that's what it means to be a Christian at all. At the same time, I do have to tell you honestly, Jesus was uniquely the way back to God. And I think he could be that for you too. And I'd love to talk some more about that.
Here's another difficult question that a lot of us really deal with. I myself also deal with it, is this idea of sexual choice. So how do we apply that issue of trust in this matter of, do we have a sexual choice?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sexual choice could be as simple as premarital sex, or there are different kinds of sexual choices. One of the big issues in our culture is sexual orientation and homosexuality, and I've had a lot of people ask me about that. How can you Christians be so judgmental and so narrow and reject people for who they are? And so again, I'll ask them, why do you ask that? What's been your experience? And often I've heard about a Christian they've run into or somebody that they heard preaching against, and they felt judged and they felt condemned. And so my first step is just to apologize for that. I'm really sorry that someone communicated that way and judged you in that way. They didn't have a right to tell you who you are and to judge you for it. At the same time, what I'll also say, because for me it's building the bridge of trust, but also speaking truth. And both are critically important. And so for me, I'll raise the issue. I don't think they can tell you who you are, but I think we live in a culture that we want to name ourselves. We want to stand on our own and decide who we are, and we leave God out of that picture. And I think God is crucial in the picture of telling us who we are. And I think I have to face that. You have to face that. A homosexually oriented person has to face that. And my first challenge to somebody is, will you let God in? Will you let God begin to tell you who you are? And that's a challenge that I make to people who have that orientation.
You know, sometimes when I feel like people ask me these really stumbling questions, I kind of sometimes will respond with, there's some things that we just won't know.
I think "I don't know" is a wonderful response to tough questions because, again, if tough questions are trust questions, and what people have distrusted is arrogant know-it-all judgmentalism, then "I don't know" is powerfully freeing and can break the stereotype. So I think that can be a great step. Now, I do sometimes run into people who have, on the other hand, run into Christians that will say, well, you just got to have faith, and it's kind of an escape from facing hard issues. And they distrust that kind of response. And so that's the one kind of caveat is that I'd say, again, I would ask them a question. But I think you're absolutely right. I don't know is a powerful trust-building response.
Do you have any examples biblically from the way Jesus would handle tough questions?
I do. One of the stories I think about is the story when Jesus encountered a Samaritan woman in John 4, it's recorded. She asks him, do we worship God in Jerusalem at the temple like the Jews say, or do we worship God in Samaria here at this hill like the Samaritans say? And Jesus didn't just respond to the question. He didn't pick A or B. He reframed the whole question, and he broke her stereotype of what a Jewish man would say. He said, neither. The time is coming when those things won't matter. It's who worships God in spirit and truth. And by reframing the question and not fitting into what she expected him to say, he broke the stereotype, rebuilt trust, and then spoke powerful truth. I think Jesus did that all the time.
I think that's powerful. I think those are three elements in which would really help, those overcome some really difficult questions.